2024. And we have present in the meeting Councillors John Anderson, Ralph Barker, Walter Brogan, Robert Brown, Andy Carmichael. I'll just check if Councillor Convery is in the meeting. We don't have Councillor Convery. We have apologies from Councillor Poppy Corbett. We have present Councillor Andrea Cowan, Margaret Cowie, Maureen Devlin, Colin Dewar. We don't have Councillor Fagan in the meeting. We have present Councillor Gladys Ferguson-Miller, Ross Gowland, Graham Horn, Cal Johnson-Dempsey. I'll just check if Councillor Kerr is in the meeting. We have Councillor Kerr in the meeting also. And we don't have Councillor Lennon. We have Councillor Lockhart. I'll just check if we get Councillor MacDonald. We don't have Councillor Hugh MacDonald. We have present Councillor Ian McCarlin, Kenny McCreary. We have apologies from Councillor McLachlan. We have present Councillor Carol Nugent and apologies from Councillor Helen Toner, and Councillor Clark is substituting. And we also have present David Watson. Can I just check, Councillor Faulkner, are you substituting?
Councillor McLachlan.
And Councillor Faulkner is a substitute for Councillor McLachlan. Thank you. I'll hand back to the Chair.
Right, thank you very much. Can I then ask item 1, any declaration of interests? John Anderson.
Chair, I'd like to declare an interest in agenda number 8 as I sit on the board of Routes to Work South.
Okay, thank you very much for that. With that, can we move on to item 2, minutes of the previous meeting, pages 5 to 20. Can I move that as a correct record of the meeting? Any issues on that one? Agreed. Thank you very much. Item 3, Revenue Budget Monitoring Statement 23-24, pages 21 to 30. Could I ask Louise Harvey to speak to the report? Louise.
Thank you, Chair, and good afternoon, everyone. This is the first of 2 reports at committee today on the revenue budget for community and enterprise resources. The first is the final report for the financial year 23-24, covering the revenue budget position from the 1st of April 23 through to the 31st of March 24. And the second will cover the new financial year 24-25, based on the new style of fusion reporting as at the period 4 of the new financial year, which was the 12th of July. So paragraph 5.1 on page 21 outlines the year-end position as at the 31st of March 24, and this is a reported break-even position after the approved transfers to reserves for the resource. The position is detailed in Appendix A, and the approved transfers to reserves are noted at the bottom of Appendix B to F as appropriate, and these have been approved by the Executive Committee in June 24 as part of the overall outturn position for the full Council. Paragraph 5.2 outlines the key variances in relation to the year-end position and the balanced budget position in line with our probable outturn exercise. The overall position is represented by underspends in employee costs across all services, overspends within roads, transportation and fleet in relation to transport costs, depots, charging for electric vehicles, and an under-recovery in parking income, and this is offset by an over-recovery in vehicle maintenance within the fleet side. Within facilities, waste and grounds, we have an overspend on the cost of bin replacement programme and the disposal cost within waste, cleaning material and also cleaning materials and facilities. And across all resources, there are pressures and reported overspends relating to medical costs and IT system upgrade costs. Detailed variance explanations by the services are included in the individual appendices, again, Appendix B through to F. Budget environments are proposed to set out at the bottom of these appendices, and these reflect updates to the community enterprise budget since we last reported on the 28th of January through to the 31st of March. And this covers all associated year-end accounting transactions across some of these main areas: transfers to reserves, accounting entries for capital and general year-end accounting requirements. We've also got budget uploads to reflect service activity and transfers of budget to other resources, again in line with service change. So if I can refer committee back to paragraph 2, the committee is asked to approve the following recommendations: that the final outturn position for community and enterprise resources at the 31st of March is a balanced budget position after the approved transfers to reserves, and this is outlined in Appendix A, and this is noted, and that the proposed budget variants as detailed in Appendix B to F are approved. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks very much, Louise. I mean, it all feels a bit historic now, doesn't it? Can I move the report? Are there any questions on it? No questions. Can I move the report?
I'll second it.
Report's agreed. Can we move on to item 4, which is the more up-to-date budget monitoring statement 24-25, pages 31 to 40. Back to Louise again.
Yep, thank you. So the second report today and the first this committee for the new financial year 24-25, covering the revenue budget position reporting at the 12th of July, which, as I've said, is period 4 of the new financial year, and it does introduce the new reporting format via a new Fusion financial management reporting application. So members were updated at the training session earlier in the year and the new reporting format for Fusion for 24-25s, and this provides information for each period on a projected outturn forecast on expenditure and income at that date, and for this report it's at the 12th of July. So this is a new approach and allows us early monitoring of outturn for both employee and non-employee budgets. Also included is a new service analysis statement, and it outlines key highlights by service for the resource, and that's shown in Appendix A. In terms of the standard information, turning to the main financial implications of the report, paragraph 5.1 and page 31, the resource is projecting an outturn for 24-25 of a break-even balanced budget position. So again, this is an early forecast at the 12th of July. Variance explanations are outlined in Appendix B through to F for each of the service areas, and in the main underspends are across employee costs, and these are supporting costs of transport across various services, the under-recovery of school meals income and also parking income. There are additional costs of supplies due to the cost of the bin replacement programme, IT costs and minor overspends in property due to depot costs, and additional costs within admin, again due to medicals, and also leasing in terms of the financing charges outlined. So budget variants again, these are proposed at the bottom of the appendices, and these reflect changes to the new community and enterprises budget and set up the budget at the start of the new financial year from the 1st of April through to the 12th of July. So these cover the transfers for funded items, mostly pay award and the cost of waste, transfers to corporate items, again for employee type costs in relation to pension contributions, budget realignments to reflect how we deliver our services, transfers from reserves for expenditure commitments that we have, again transfer between resources for service delivery changes, mostly around the change in the employability programme, and also the creation of budget to reflect the receipt of external income. So if I can refer committee back to paragraph 2 again, the committee is asked to approve the following recommendations: that a forecast outturn to the 31st of March of a break-even position on the community and enterprise revenue budget as detailed in Appendix A is noted, and also that the proposed budget variants are approved. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Louise. Obviously, it's an early stage of the year yet. Questions to John Anderson, please.
It's not questions to John Anderson.
From John Anderson.
Could I just ask, through here, page 34, the employee costs, it's 95 million. Last year, the budget was 102 million for employee costs. And when you consider there's been pay increases, national insurance and pension increases, that's a reduction of £7 million. Has there been a headcount reduction that enables you to take £7 million from that budget?
Yeah,
And the second question I was going to ask about was the variance explanations on page 35. An overspend in waste services due to overtime costs. And I noticed we're taking money out of reserves to try and reduce overtime costs. Is there a reason why we're spending additional overtime costs in waste services? Is it to help deal with the fly tipping that's increased? Thank you.
Okay, on the first part, it's about the reduction in the employer contribution around the Strathclyde Pension Fund, and there was a reduction in contributions from the previous 17.5% to 6.5%. So for community and enterprise, that was around 7 million, and that's transferred back to the centre as part of the financial strategy to deal with other pressures. On the second point, around the overtime, there are costs within overtime and across the way service at the moment. That's obviously reflecting the additional costs as a result of the POPs. Kevin might explain what that is, but the new requirements, and we've got approval to recruit new posts for that. But at the moment, those staff are only coming in at the beginning of this month and into next month. So we've had additional overtime as well as the covering of absences.
Yeah, the POPs is couches and things with funny materials in it, isn't it? Kevin, do you want to come in on that one, please?
Thanks, Chair. Louise has just about covered it. So if you remember back to committee in June, we had a paper on POPs outlining the problems they had with it and asking for additional resource for staffing and for vehicles to implement new practices so that we could reduce our costs. So obviously that's happened in year. So we're bearing the additional costs at the first part of the year, and this just reflects movement to accommodate that.
Okay, John, if you have anything to come back on there? No? Okay. Councillor Gladys Miller, please.
Thank you, Chair. I'm looking at page 34, Appendix B, at the finance charges with the revised annual budget of 197 and the projected outturn at 214. There doesn't seem to be any notes or explanation on that. And I was just wondering if it's a confident forecast, because I think last year, if I remember rightly, the cost was 233.
Louise?
Yep. It reflects the financing charges is where we pay for the leasing costs associated with our IT, our laptops and PCs, etc. for our staff. So we did have a change to that service provision across the pandemic, and we moved into a more mobile solution, as you're aware, and that came in at a slightly higher cost. So we are carrying that as a resource. We are managing it within the overall position. At the moment, we've reflected what we think, as I say, it was an early forecast at July. You correctly say the actual outturn was 233 for last financial year, but at the moment we're projecting 214, but we will be refining that as we move across the year. But that's what it represents, the additional costs of the mobile solutions that we put in place through the pandemic.
And to be fair, I think it's mentioned in the report, although maybe not the linkage perhaps, yeah. Gladys, is that okay?
Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair.
Okay, any other questions? In which case, can I move the report?
I'll second it.
Report's agreed. Moving on to item 5, and that's the capital budget monitoring 23-24, pages 41 to 44. In this instance, Graham Booth to speak to the report. Graham.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, members. Item 5 is the final capital budget monitoring report for financial year 23-24, and the purpose is to advise committee for the spend to the year to the 31st of March. The resources spend was included in the overall position reported to the Executive Committee back in June. Section 3 gives the background and explains the budget position for the year, which was a total budget of 45.177 million, and that budget was unchanged since we last reported to the Community and Enterprises Resources Committee back in April this year. Section 5 details the financial implications, and Section 5.1 notes the total programme for the year was the 45.177 million, with a final spend position for the financial year of 33.935 million. And as noted in Section 5.2, this underspend of 11.2 million reflects the timing of project spend on a number of multi-year projects. The main projects which are responsible for the underspend are categorised under roads, transport and fleet, just under £5 million, enterprise and sustainable development, £4.8 million, and facilities, waste and grounds, just under £1.5 million. Section 5.3 notes that any underspend in these projects, along with the funding, will carry forward into next financial year as required. and an update on the New Year programme is detailed in the next report to the committee, which I'll take you through shortly. Section 5.4 just explains the year-end and accounting adjustments we make to the capital programme to ensure that the treatment of spend complies with our accounting regulations. And this has no physical impact on the projects. It is an accounting entry only, and it's to make sure that all spend is categorised correctly as either revenue or capital. Section 5.5 explains that from reviewing the revenue and capital spend, £1.5 million of capital spend was required to be recorded as revenue, and conversely, £146,000 of revenue spend should have been recorded as capital. And these transfers mean that for the purpose of publishing our annual accounts only, there is capital spend of £32.567 million. I would refer committee back to the recommendation section 2 of the report and ask that the Community and Enterprise Resources budget of £45.177 million and final spend for the year of £33.935 million be noted. Thank you.
Thanks very much. I think we're familiar with the carryovers and the adjustments between revenue and capital. Again, it's a wee bit historic. Any questions on that report? In which case, can I move the report?
Second.
Report's agreed. Move on to item 6, which is the equivalent capital budget monitoring statement for 24-25, pages 45 to 48. And can I invite Graham Booth to speak to that report as well?
Moving into the new year then, this is the standard capital budget monitoring report, the first for this year, and reflects the budget and spend position to the 12th of July, which is our accounting period 4. Section 3 gives the background to the report and explains the budget reflects the capital programme for the new year as reported to the Executive Committee on the 4th of September. And Section 5 details the financial implications. Section 5.1 notes that the Resources total capital programme for this year is £62.172 million, and this budget is based on the original programme of projects approved back in February, and this has been updated to include budget carried forward from 2023-24 as per the previous paper, as well as additional funding received and used to fund expenditure in 24-25. And the budget also reflects the estimated level of spend achievable for this financial year based on our current estimates. Section 5.2 notes that the programme also includes budget amendments totaling a net increase of £11.598 million, which have been identified since the approval of the revised 24-25 budget back in June, and they are detailed at the bottom of Appendix A for information. Again, as Louise touched on before, Section 5.3 notes the move to the Fusion IT system and the fact we'll be focusing on a forecasting outturn throughout the year rather than the in-period variances, and this will allow us for early warning of any issues and give us time to take corrective action against the capital projects for the year. And as noted in Section 5.4, Appendix A notes the full forecast spend against the budget of £62.172 million, and also notes the actual spend incurred to 12th of July of £3.378 million. I would refer committee back to the recommendation in Section 2 that the budget of £62.172 million and forecast spend of £61.72 million be noted. Thank you.
Any questions on that report? In which case, can I move the report?
I'll second it.
And the report's agreed. Thank you very much. Moving on to the workforce monitoring report, which is item 7, pages 49 to 56, and back over to Elaine Maxwell to speak to that report. Elaine.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, everyone. This is a standard workforce monitoring report which provides committee with an update on the employment information for the period of April to June of this year for Community and Enterprise Resources. Section 4 outlines the absence statistics for the resource, and you will see that the resource absence figure for June was 6%, which represents a slight increase of 0.1% when we compare ourselves to last month. And then when we look and compare ourselves to June of last year, we will see the increase is 0.3%. You will also note that the June figure for the resource is 0.8% higher than the council-wide figure. As we always do, we base our absence figures as at June and project over what the annual average for the resource will be for the period 24-25, and we can see that it's projected to be 6.3% compared to a council-wide average of 5.5%. As always, just to provide committee with reassurance about the work that's ongoing within the resource with our managers along with personnel to ensure that we support our employees to return to work or provide the appropriate routes to enable them to get the correct supports. I suppose just in terms of additional information and kind of linking into what the next update in terms of occupational health information is, certainly within community and enterprise resources, we have seen quite a number of ill health retirement applications across the year. And to date, we've had 14 cases that have been considered to date, with another 13 awaiting outcomes. So certainly that has an impact on our absence percentages. Section 4.2, as I alluded to there in terms of the occupational health information, which is found in Appendix 2, shows that there were 325 occupational health referrals made during the period, and that represents an increase of 34 when we look at the same period last year. And as I highlighted there, medical examinations along with physio make up the main increase across that period, and that's pretty consistent with the other resources across the council. What we can see in terms of our timescales for occupational health, with the move to a new provider, we are seeing these appointments coming through quicker, so therefore more employees are being able to be seen during the period. Section 4.3 details the accidents and incident statistics for the resource, and we can see that there were 48 recorded within the resource for the period, and that represents an increase of 11 when compared to the same period last year. Again, when you look at the appendix, you'll see that that increase is there's not any one area that's relating to, it's just small increases across each of the categories. Section 4.4 outlines the employee relations activity, and we can see that there were 24 disciplinary hearings held in the resource for the period, with no other employee relations activity recorded at that time. Section 4.5 moves on to the analysis of leavers, and we can see that there were 39 leavers eligible for an exit interview, with 6 exit interviews being conducted. I suppose just in linking in terms of the new Fusion project, so there is a new exit interview form being designed, and there's going to be a new process, and any employee who leaves the council will have this automatically sent. So hopefully we will then see an increase in uptake in the exit interviews. Section 4.7 shows that 108 employees left the resource during the period, and managers indicated that 107 of those posts will be replaced, with 1 post due to end due to a fixed term contract. Section 5 moves on to show the staffing watch information for the resource, to show that there was an increase of 180 employees in post between the 9th of March and the 11th of June. And as I say, that information is found in Appendix 3, and the main reason you will be familiar will be due to the seasonal intake with our Crown's services staff. So with that, I would refer committee back to Section 2 within the report and ask you to approve the recommendation to note the employment information for April to June 2024. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Elaine. I think behind that there does lie 1 or 2 issues with regard to our relationship with the NHS services. It was good news, I think, that you had reported on with regard to physiotherapy. I wonder if you say anything further about the delays on early retirement, which is an issue you touched on.
Yeah, as I said, we're seeing quite a number of employees that want to present themselves to be considered for ill health retirement. Until an employee to have access to their pension, that has to be supported with specific occupational health information, which also includes information from the employee's GP or consultant. And certainly what we're seeing is quite a bit of a delay in terms of getting that information to come in to allow our occupational health people to make that decision. So for some of the ones of the 13 that were outstanding just now, more than half of them we've been waiting for 3 months for that information from. So that will obviously have an impact on our employees. It will have an impact on obviously their personal circumstances in terms of what they're entitled to. But we're certainly working with our occupational health provider to try and ensure that we're chasing it up as quickly as possible. But we are at the mercy of waiting on some information coming from the specialists in that regard, to allow the employees' health condition to be considered appropriately.
Yeah, thank you very much. I did want to highlight that because I think it's of importance both to our employees, and also to our service as well. Any other questions? Rolf Barker.
Thank you, Chair. Can I just make my usual comment on accident statistics? And that is that compared to industrial organisations, near-miss reporting is very low, and I would say out of proportion to the other reports. Near-miss reporting is an important part of accident prevention and I just think we should take that into account. That say, compared to other organisations, the near miss, it seems to be underreported near misses, and we should encourage near miss reporting, although it's difficult. Thanks very much, Chair.
Elaine?
I can certainly take that back to our health and safety manager within personnel services, and certainly there's an ongoing work between ourselves, personnel, with the resources, with our trade union colleagues, to make sure that all incidents, you know, in each of the categories are being reported appropriately. You know, so it's something that's quite heavily discussed at a number of forums, but I'm more than happy to pick that up and take it back to the health and safety manager.
Thanks very much. If there's no further questions, can I move the report?
I'll second it.
And the report's agreed. Can we move on to item 8, which is the Employability Services report, pages 57 to 78. As you know, this has come under the aegis of Community and Enterprise fairly recently, so it's a new area for us. Can I invite Douglas Hashigan to speak to the report, please?
Thanks, Chair, and good afternoon, members. As Councillor Brown said, the Employability Service has been within Community and Enterprise since the start of the financial year, so an opportunity to provide a bit of an update on the work of the service, and particularly some of the funding arrangements. So the first thing to cover is the majority of our funding through employability is externally funded through either Scottish Government or UK Government. And we received a No One Left Behind grant from Scottish Government for this financial year in June, totalling around £4.2 million. And as part of that funding, we're required to develop an annual investment plan, which we jointly developed with our colleagues from Skills Development Scotland, DWP and various other partners through the local employability partnership. That plan has been developed, sets out our plans for the year, and has been approved by Scottish Government and is attached as an appendix to the report. A big element of that plan is delivered in-house by the Council, but a significant element is also delivered by Roots Towards South, who, if members are aware, are an arm's length organisation the Council established for a number of years. We have particular arrangements with Roots Towards South which allow us to directly award the provision of activity through a TECL contract. So one of the asks on the paper is that contract is approved, that we were able to enter into a contract for this financial year with Roots Towards South. As part of the expanded activity of the programme, particularly with a focus on young people and adults with additional support needs and with parents, there's a request to add 9 temporary posts to the employability establishment, which will be subject to the kind of funding confirmation for the next financial year, to allow us to deliver the kind of wider scope of services to that group of beneficiaries. And the last couple of things in the paper are around our work with our colleges. So a part of what we do is delivering employability services on behalf of schools, so senior phase work-based learning programmes, particularly foundation apprenticeships and graduate. So foundation apprenticeships are a level 6 qualification equivalent to a higher, and graduate is equivalent to a national 5. So we work closely with South Lanarkshire College, New College Lanarkshire for the delivery of foundation apprenticeships, and with those two colleges, and with Glasgow Kelvin College for the delivery of graduate. And the paper requests approval for us to enter into consortium agreement with those colleges for the delivery of those programmes. And there's more detail in the paper around all those issues, but happy to take any questions.
Thanks very much, Douglas. There's a very interesting report, I think, with a lot of detail in it. I should say that Douglas and I attended on Friday in Cambuslang a Roots to Work South thing jointly with the Scottish Government with regard to National Employability Day and the National Strategy, and that was quite a worthwhile thing to go to as well. So there's a wide pattern of things here across a number of areas. Questions, David Watson?
Thanks, Chair. Correctly say interesting report, but I think what I want to focus on the ASN and disabilities, but I suppose it could transcend some of the categories that are in the report as well, and actual outcomes from that. My experience is that ASN and individuals with disability struggle to get employment, and there's one thing saying we can take them through a course, we can give them support up to they're finished at whatever we do with them in these programmes, but what happens after that? And it's easy to say they're maybe ready to go into the workplace, but what workplace? I mean, but are we tying in with businesses and organisations to support them and taking in ASN and disabled individuals? You know, and I say that the report looks good and we're reading, going down a pathway, but what happens when you hit that buffer at the end of the pathway and there's no employment opportunities for these individuals?
I think a good deal of this has, in fact, got follow-through stuff with individuals and obviously preliminary planning stuff with employers too. But Douglas, you can perhaps say more about that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think it's worth pointing out that through our programmes, the majority of people that we work with have some kind of health condition or additional support need, particularly the young people we work with. And some people with those additional support needs can engage with that, with a key worker and I suppose what we'd call mainstream employability services, move into employment. But you're absolutely right that some people require that more intensive long-term support as well as a significant period of aftercare. So it's not just about moving that individual into employment, but it's about working with the employer once they're in employment to address any issues, to support training, to work close with the employer about amending tasks and things so they meet the needs of those people. But I mean, you're absolutely right, finding that employment can be the big challenge. So what we've done recently is increase the kind of capacity within our team to put some more key workers in. And we've got particularly good relationships with NHS and ISS at Hale Myers because often it's the large public sector employers that can kind of offer that long-term employment support.
Sorry, you just triggered something there by saying the NHS and Hale Myers. I'm aware of somebody that was in NHS Hale Myers and working there. But again, they ended up their period there and there was no onward or re-employment or onward employment. They were basically then, that's your time up and you're out basically. And that's the sort of thing I'm trying to get at. This young man's now got a job somewhere else, which is good. But again, it's always a case of he's never sure of his long-term employment there, and I think that's what I'm trying to get at. That it's okay, maybe they'll tick boxes and get some short-term employment, but we really need to be trying to make sure that folk with difficulties and disabilities can get secure long-term employment. Thanks, sorry for
Thank you, Councillor Watt.
Sorry, that was me. I did something funny. Yeah.
Maybe just to sort of pick up on that point, one of the opportunities I saw with employability coming across to community and enterprise was the linkage with business and to do a wee bit more in terms of the employers that we're already working with through sort of the business support team and trying to sort of join those conversations. So that's an area of activity that we, myself and Douglas and others have started a conversation on and just seeing how we can sort of bolster that. And the second point I just wanted to highlight to committee is this is the first paper that you've seen from the employability team, and there's a lot in this, but we want to come back to you with more regular monitoring reports to give you some of the detail behind the work that Douglas is doing, some of the case studies, and try and get down and drill down into some of this detail and hopefully identify, you know, some areas that are working well and other areas that we maybe need a more concerted focus on. So again, that's intended to come back to you actually in November for the next committee.
I think, to be fair, Councillor Watson's hit on a crucial point behind this, which I think we're aware of. As I said before, I think a good bit of the work that's done does in fact have follow-through support, if you like, which is designed to kind of tackle this issue. As it happens, one of the people we spoke to on Friday had in fact gone through the Hale Myers programme and ended up as a porter there, and a very successful placement following it through. Now, I'm not pretending that'll happen in every case because every case will be different. I have asked them to look at the kind of way in which this might be sensibly reported back, because I think there's a flavour of it in one instance, what happens in individual cases. And there's also a kind of total numbers thing. The report's not, because I think the style it's done for this purpose, it's not entirely clear on the kind of numbers going through the system, but more to the point, it's not so much the tick box of the numbers, it's the numbers that sustain an employment afterwards and how we actually record and monitor that. We've got quite a good process of doing that with transition from school, and we know the follow-ups from a lot of the young people that leave school, etc., where they're going, what they're doing, and what the success rate is there. And it's something like that that we want really out of this stuff as well, isn't it? Any other questions on that? Can I therefore move the report? And as I said, it'll be coming back later on as well. Thank you. Moving on to item 9, community... Sorry?
Just waiting on David.
Oh, right, okay.
John.
John Anderson. Oh, that's right. John was out for that one. Sorry, I forgot about that. Sorry, John, I forgot you had to go out for that particular one. Thank you and welcome back. Can we move on to item 9, which is the Community Benefit Fund's Renewable Energy Fund grant applications, page 79 to 84. And this is one of Alison Brown's starring events.
Thank you. This paper seeks approval for 3 grant awards from the Renewable Energy Fund. The first is to Edelwood Football Association for a grant award of £40,000 towards a total project cost of £80,000 for drainage works to the existing football pitch, which will allow year-round access to the pitch for training and matches. The second grant award is to Lowther Men's Shed to continue work on the re-erection of the former ski hut into the centre of the Lead Hills village. Works will include making the structure wind and watertight, internal refurbishment, a new kitchen, solar panels and a heating system. The total project cost is £157,000 and a grant award of £94,268 is recommended. And the final grant award is to Wilford's, Auchengrey and Tarbach's Improvement Foundation to redevelop the cow byre at Lonehead Farm into a cafe, and the appointment of a manager for a 2-year period to deliver community income generating projects for that community. The project will support community wealth building, rural business activity and inclusive growth. The total project value is £374,000 with a grant recommended of £200,000. And with that, I'd ask committee to approve the grant awards as set out in section 2 to each of those groups. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Alison. Any question on those reports? Looks some interesting and productive projects, I think. No questions? Can I move the report?
I'll second it.
Report's approved. Moving on to item 10, UK Shared Prosperity Fund, the grant applications, pages 85 to 90. Can I invite Tom Little to speak to that report? Tom. Sorry. Oh, it's Jennifer, sorry, okay.
You're okay, thank you. Hi. This report seeks approval of a grant for Larkhall Community Growers of up to £35,000, as well as provides an update on the other additional community grant programmes that are taking place through the Communities in Place investment priority of the UK Shared Prosperity Fund. Section 4 provides a bit more information on the Communities in Place grant and a bit of background and places the Larkhall Community Growers grant in that context. Section 5 outlines the suitability of the organisation for the intended purpose of the grant and the expected activities that the grant would fund. Section 6 recommends the approval of £35,000 of grant funding as match funding for a previously approved REF fund here at this committee. It also provides an outline of an additional programme, a new programme of grants for a community of interest, the Community Food Network Development, which you'll receive information on at your next meeting in November.
Thank you very much. Any questions, Ross Clark?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the report. And I would like to welcome the grant going towards Larkhall Community Growers. I can, as well as I'm sure other ward members could attest to the work they do in the community and their benefit to the town is great. I think it's also good to note some of the positive climate change impacts noted in the report as well. The grants help deliver sustainability and help reduce carbon emissions. I think that's a good thing to highlight. But on specifically the grant, I'd like to ask, is this funding guaranteed? And I ask that because obviously the Shared Prosperity Fund is part of the UK Government's Levelling Up agenda. And there has been, of course, reports that this funding isn't guaranteed, and the new UK Government hasn't ruled out clawing back some of the money that's been allocated to Levelling Up projects. And of course that would apply to other Levelling Up projects in South Lanarkshire. So any information you can provide about this, the security of this grant and other Levelling Up projects in South Lanarkshire would be appreciated. And if you don't have information to hand, would appreciate being updated as well. Thank you.
I think there's an important point. There's a timing issue, perhaps, though, is it? Alison, can you say anything about this?
Thank you, Councillor. Yes, the UK Shared Prosperity funding that this grant application is referring to is actually with us. So we are required to spend this money by March 2025. Otherwise, we lose it. So we do actually have that money, and indeed we have to report against spend to Glasgow City Region. The other reference that you make to UK Levelling Up projects, you are right, they are to a degree in a holding pattern in terms of a budget announcement in October. The future of UK Shared Prosperity funding and other Scottish Government funding is currently unknown at this time going forward, so we await that information, but this particular allocation does require to be spent by March.
I'd assumed it was something you actually wanted to have spent by March, was it? Yeah, thought it might be. Okay, Kenny McCreary, please.
Thanks, Chair. Obviously, I don't represent Whatcall, but quite often Whatcall comes to our attention through like bad news, issues with the sports centre, for example. So it's certainly very good news and very much to be welcomed. And let's just hope nothing goes wrong with it and that this organisation do get the money. That's all, Chair. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Andy Carmichael.
Thanks, Chair. Like Councillor Clark, I welcome this funding to Whatcall Community Growers. They do a fantastic job within the community and have done for many, many years. The question I want to ask is, why are the local members not informed of these grant applications when they happen? The only time we get to know them is when it comes up like on committee today. Thank you.
Can anyone say anything about that? Jennifer? You are the publicity department.
With UK Shared Prosperity Fund, the SLC P7 business case was put forward at the beginning of the grant programme. We just bring it back to make decisions on the grants themselves when they're given out. Does that answer your question?
Are there any improvements that could be made in the way in which local members are informed? That's probably the key point, isn't it?
I suppose we could, so we could notify when we receive an application.
Mm-hmm. David?
Thank you. Thanks very much. And thank you very much, Councillor, for your question. I think that there are a lot of funds that we have to deal with, a great deal of number of funds all at different stages. What we do try and do is, where it's appropriate and where it's possible, is to make sure there's some elected member exposure and understanding of the funding. So I suppose picking up on Councillor Carmichael's point, it's one that we'll take back and we can consider ways in which we can involve local members a bit earlier in the process where it's appropriate to do so, if that's okay.
Thanks very much. Hopefully that'll be a reassurance for Andy. Did you want to come back, Andy? Are you okay?
Yes, Robert.
Yes, did you want to come back in on that? Sorry. The answer is no. By the looks
Can you hear me okay?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, okay, thank you very much. Right, thank you very much for letting me come back in. Yeah, I'm more than happy with that because at the end of the day, as I said previously, all funding is welcome within each member's ward. But unfortunately, it's the whole of the ward that we represented. Sometimes the whole of the ward doesn't get benefit of such grants. So, that, yes, I welcome that and thanks very much for it. Take care.
Thank you. Okay, can I therefore move the report?
I'll second it.
And the report's approved. Moving on to item, I'm losing track of my numbers now. Item 11 is the South Lanarkshire Council's food service plan for 24-25, pages 91 to 120. Craig Brown, I think, is speaking to this report. Craig.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, members. The purpose of this report is to seek approval for the food service plan for 2024-25. Environmental health is a statutory duty to enforce food safety legislation, and the service plan sets out the plan programme for 24-25 and is covered in sections 3 and 4 of the report. Details of the plan are in Appendix 1 of the report. The service plan includes details of the number and range of food businesses across South Lanarkshire, and currently we have over 3,000 food businesses operating within the South Lanarkshire area, and these range from large food manufacturing businesses to small community-based shops. The food industry is a substantial employer in the area, and we try to support those businesses by giving them sound food safety and food law advice. It's interesting to note that over the last 10 years, we've actually seen a 20% increase in the number of food businesses that operate within South Lanarkshire, which is testament to the support that the Council gives to businesses, but it also does come with an added burden in terms of inspections. The service plan details the impact, the increased number of businesses, the levels of compliance, and recent changes at a national level to inspection programme has in our resources. Because of these high demands, we are often required to prioritise interventions, which we do towards high-risk businesses and food manufacturing businesses. Food Standards periodically audit our food safety work, and the last audit was carried out in February 2023. The areas noted for improvement at that time have all now been actioned, and Food Standards Scotland have signed off on the audit report. I would refer members back to section 2 of the report, and I would ask the committee to approve the food service plan for 2024-25.
Thanks very much, Craig. I personally find this a fascinating report. There's a lot of very, very useful information in it about the breakdown of businesses, and I guess it's one of these areas where the less we hear of any problems in the area, the better the work that's been done by the department is. And I think we're grateful for the safety work that's done in that context. In terms of questions, Councillor Ross Clark.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the report. My point isn't actually about the report, just to say they come in a point of order. I understand quite a few people on Conferro have been, ejected from the meeting quite a few times today. Just make sure IT is aware of that issue.
We can see the numbers drop, and it's happened 3 times, and we're alerting IT when it's happening. Most of them are coming back in again within a few seconds, but we are aware of it.
Thank you. Just make sure we're aware of that.
Yeah, thanks very much, Ross. Any questions on the report? In which case, can I move the report?
I'll second it.
Thank you, and the report's approved. Moving on to item 12. This is quite an important report, the Ash dieback disease report, pages 121 to 144, and Kevin Carr starring in this one.
Thanks for the introduction, Chair. Afternoon, members. The purpose of today's report is to provide members with an update on the work undertaken in relation to Ash dieback disease and to recommend adoption of the Ash dieback action plan. The disease was first reported in South Lanarkshire in 2012, with European data suggesting that the spread of disease will lead to the decline in death of between 50% and 75% of all ash trees. In Scotland alone, this has the potential to impact on 75 million ash trees. Over recent years, the Ground Service has been allocated funding to begin survey work of the local ash population, deal with trees at the highest risk, and begin development of an action plan to manage the issues over the long term. £100,000 was received in 22-23, a further £500,000 the year after, and £200,000 in 24-25. This funding has allowed the service to review current operational practices and incorporate ash dieback disease into the existing workload and move towards managing trees proactively. It has enabled the purchase of specialised plant, access machinery and the procurement of additional contractors. It's also allowed the appointment of temporary tree assessing officers and temporary grow your own operational staff, targeting the recruitment of young people. This has allowed the service to address pre-existing recruitment challenges and will provide a level of succession planning in an ageing workforce. The investment has also allowed further development of tree asset management software and enhancement of the Council's web page to support channel shift, with customers accessing a wealth of self-service information on ash dieback disease as required. There's also been a broader restructure within the Arboricultural Service, with the creation of a strategic function to focus on ash dieback, proactive woodland management and the Clyde Climate Forest, and an operational function focused on the day-to-day Arbor service, tackling the backlog of reactive tree work. This has been delivered within the existing budget of the service. Over the last 2 years, survey work has continued at pace, with almost 125,000 ash trees identified from a best estimate population of around 146,000. These are trees either managed or owned by the Council or in private ownership within falling distance of the road or a public area. The extent of the disease continues to steadily progress by tree size and age, as shown in section 5.1 of the report. 60% of the identified ash trees have been assessed as ash health class 2, 3 or 4, which means they are showing some signs of disease, with around 32% at the later stages of ash health class 3 or 4. The precise speed of decline of any individual ash tree is currently impossible to predict, but can be influenced by several factors, including the weather. The targeting of long-term resource at monitoring the health of ash trees and focusing on those trees with severe symptoms and higher risk locations will be considered as part of the action plan. Financial estimates are based on the average price to remove a diseased tree with within high value targets such as roads, buildings and utility lines, or woodland type settings with lower value targets. Following increased survey work, estimates for worst case tree works suggest that the Council's potential financial costs associated with dealing with 50 to 75% mortality over the long term on land it manages or owns has now decreased from the previous estimate of around £11 million to somewhere between 5.1 and 9.6 million respectively. This estimate excludes traffic management costs and replacement planting. Additionally, there are significant numbers of ash trees not owned by the Council within falling distance of the road that could incur additional costs for the Council to remove if deemed dangerous and not removed by the owner. These will be progressed as they arise on a case-by-case basis. Given the scale of the issue, an ash dieback action plan has been developed that will help the Council manage this risk over the long term. The plan is in line with the Ash Dieback Scotland toolkit and addresses the risks presented by the impact of ash dieback on people and property, as well as the ecosystems ash trees are found across South Lanarkshire. It prepares for a positive recovery phase to achieve a net biodiversity gain by 2034 and landscape recovery by 2054, therefore achieving national targets. This planned approach will also help us retain more ash trees for longer, so that we can reduce the impact of the disease and manage time and costs more effectively. Additional funding will be considered through future capital programmes. However, the Council will also continue to lobby through COSLA and other national forums for additional financial support from Government on an issue that will place a significant burden on all councils over the long term. If I could take members back to the recommendations in section 2, members are asked to note the works undertaken to date, the ongoing risk management and financial implications associated with ash dieback be noted, and that the ash dieback disease action plan, as shown in Appendix 1, be agreed. Thanks.
Thanks very much, Kevin. Can I just check what we're doing on the IT problem, if that's still an issue?
Messaged IT just to let them know we've had a few dropouts, but there's little that we can do here. We don't know what the issue is. It could be Wi-Fi connection, things like that, so we don't know.
Yeah.
But we are messaging them to let them know it's happening.
Right, okay. It seems to be covered. Is that where you're going to come in on, Ross?
Sort of, yeah. I was going to say the IT issues seem to be persisting and wondering if it's worth having a short adjournment so that we can ensure that it's all fixed and every member can participate in the rest of the meeting. Quite a few weren't able to hear the full report, I understand, just there.
Yeah. Okay, I take the point, and whilst I think some of it may be Wi-Fi issues at the other end as well as things on this, can we have a 5-minute adjournment to... I'm sorry? We're going to have an adjournment. We're going to have an adjournment for... Well, we're going to check it out and just have an adjournment for 5 minutes, Jerry, if I may. I think that's fair enough if people are not getting it on the thing. Okay, so we're...
Back in the actual meeting rooms rather than every meeting we seem to have problems.
That would be a good idea as well, but...
going to say that,
councillors have actually attended where they're meant to be rather than sitting in the house or elsewhere. We might not have these problems.
Right, colleagues, let's not go off track. We're going to have an adjournment for 5 minutes. We'll check out the position. And we'll come back at 3:05. Okay, meeting's adjourned. Right, colleagues, I think we'll start again. Thank you for obliging us on the short delay there. I think it's allowed most people to be brought back on. If there's one or two others, then the IT will deal with them directly, but I think we better progress with the meeting. I think we just finished the Ash Dieback report from Kevin. I wanted to seek any questions, but I want to make a couple of comments on it as well, but I'll do the questions first. John Anderson.
Thanks, Chair. I just look for a wee bit of clarity. On page 122, 4.2, it says additional funding of 500,000 was included in the capital programme for 23-24. On page 134, 5.3, it says additional funding of 100,000 was added in 23-24. I'm assuming that's maybe a typo in the draft. That should be 500,000. I wonder if we could just clarify it and maybe change it from the draft.
Kevin?
Yeah, thanks for the question and a good spot, Councillor Andrew. Yes, it's a typo, so it was £500,000 in 23-24 rather than 100,000.
Okay. There was Andrea Cowan was on, but she's gone off. Is she's still on the IT?
She's still online.
Yeah. Andrea Cowan. Yes, there we are.
Thanks, Chair. It was actually just that I had been hoping that we would have heard that report again because I was out for the whole of Kevin's report. But I'll watch it back. I'll watch it back on YouTube, seeing as we're moving on. Thanks.
Okay, we certainly have the report before us in terms of the actual written version of it, but it is available afterwards as well. Could I say a couple of things, if I may? I mean, first of all, there are ongoing discussions, as Kevin talked about, in terms of the COSLA level, discussion with the Scottish Government. This is a big, big financial commitment. It will need, I think, extra input, hopefully from central government at some point along the line. It's also got a number of implications. I first picked this up at a meeting I went to with Network Rail about a couple of years ago, the extent of the problem. They've got huge issues with it. Private owners who are backed onto roads are going to have huge issues with it as well. There's really a lot of things that come with it. And as the report indicates, there's quite a lot of things to do as well with the nature of ash, the nature of the replanting that needs to take place in place of the ash, the inability to plant new ash, so to speak, and the things that grow under it. So I think there's a number of issues that need to be looked at in detail as we go forward here on this action plan. Could I suggest, however, that amongst other things, it be sent also to the Climate Change Committee for the tree implications for them to note and have a discussion on as well? I do think that's a worthwhile thing to suggest, because we've got obviously wider tree policies to try and get the tree cover increased and all that sort of stuff. There are issues to do with that. This doesn't help in that direction, never mind anything else, and there are major financial issues with it as well. So with those comments, unless there's any other questions, could we agree the report? Yes.
I'll second it.
Thank you very much. The report's agreed. And can we move on to item 13, which is the Air Quality Management Activity Report, pages 145 to 148. And Craig Brown is going to speak to this report.
Thank you, Chair. The purpose of this report is to update the committee on the air quality projects delivered in 2023-24 and those planned for this year. The report highlights the changes to funding sources for air quality work, and environmental health has been very successful in bidding for air quality grant funding. In the last 5 years, we've received £1.5 million in grants specifically for air quality projects. Section 4 of the report covers activity in 23-24, where we received over £340,000, and this was used for a range of projects, including vehicle emission testing, promotions to reduce engine idling, and we also arranged a Beat the Street project across the Clydesdale area. This was the 6th Beat the Street project that we've arranged since 2018, and the project promotes active travel. Over the piece, we've seen community engagement levels of between 10 to 17% where projects are running, and over the 6 years, more than 700,000 miles have been travelled during the projects. Section 5 of the report covers the activity for 24-25. The Scottish Government transferred some of the grant funding to be administered by Transport Scotland for this year, but our bids have secured almost £370,000, and we're going to use that to update monitoring equipment. We're doing air quality promotions, and we've arranged another Beat the Street project. Despite reductions in overall funding nationally, we've managed to secure 17% of the grant funds available direct from Scottish Government. Environmental Health will continue to make bids for air quality grants in future years. I would refer committee back to section 2 of the report and ask committee to note the contents of the report. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks very much, Craig. I think we should congratulate the officials on the success there, because it's important we get as much out of the pot as we can on these things. Can I ask on Beat the Street? I think the funding comes out of air quality action planning. I've always thought it's one of the best projects that we do on the council. Are we likely to get funding for this in future years, do you think?
It's difficult to say. That's the funding for Beat the Street was one of the grant streams that has been passed to Transport Scotland. We were pleased in the first year of the new grant regime to secure funding for it. They're particularly pleased that it's no longer match funded, so if we get the money, then we should be able to run a Beat the Street project within an area of South Lanarkshire. Because of the figures I've included in the report, we see it as being a success, not just in terms of what it does for air quality, but it helps promote an active lifestyle with people cycling and walking, which has got overall health benefits. So certainly it's something we will look to try and promote and run in the future.
Thank you very much. Any questions on that report? If there's not, then can I move the report?
I'll second it.
The report's approved. Moving on to item 14, the sale of nicotine vapour product enforcement, pages 149 to 152, otherwise known as vapes. Can I go to Craig Brown again to speak to that report?
Thank you, Chair. The purpose of this report is to update committee on trading standards enforcement work in relation to nicotine vapour products, and as Chair says, commonly called vapes. The Tobacco and Primary Medicine Services Act requires councils to undertake an enforcement work in relation to the age-restricted requirements of the Act. It's a criminal offence to sell vapes to anyone under 18. In 22-23, we saw a significant increase in complaints coming from a broad sector of the community in relation to the sale of vapes to children. As a result of this the increase in number of complaints, Trading Standards decided to include test purchase exercises as part of the enforcement programme in 23-24. And over the course of the year, 125 premises were visited. At 33% of these visits, retailers failed to comply with the Act, and vapes were sold to the volunteers that we use for the underage test purchases. Fixed penalty notices were then issued to the retailers for those offences. During the year, it was also disappointing to note that there was repeat offences found at 11 businesses. Because of the level of non-compliance last year, we decided we were going to include test purchase exercises in our vape enforcement work during 24-25. If repeat offences are found again this year, then consideration will be given to reporting the offences to the Procurator Fiscal, or where appropriate, they may be reported to the Licensing Board due to the repeat selling of age-restricted products to children. I would take the committee back to section 2 of the report and ask the committee to note the contents of the report.
Thanks very much. Thanks very much, Craig. I must confess I find this an appalling report, not to beat about the bush. You know, it's not from the yes, not in that sense, just in terms of the content of it. The fact that there's 1/3 of the premises visited have been found to be not compliant, and 11 of the premises not compliant on a repeat basis as well. This is really quite unacceptable. It's an issue that's been raised by this council both in motions and other respects before, and I think it's a matter of concern to lots of members as well. There is, I think, pending national legislation on this matter, which may be of some assistance as well. But I hope we might perhaps give some publicity to the issues here through our publicity department and otherwise, because it does seem to me it's one of these things where it's just not acceptable to continue in this particular fashion. Now, questions, Richard Lockhart.
It's really following on what you say. I mean, I'm not quite sure where the sanctions lie. Are there any sanctions within the council's power, or have we all got to sit around waiting for the beer mouth of national government to actually turn its attention to the problem? For my money, you know, I mean, all these things now, ASBOs and all the rest of it, amount to sort of smack on the wrist all the time, and people just go back to doing the same thing again. I'm just asking the question, is there anything the council itself can do to foreclose on these shops that are doing it or something? And there's another two have opened in Lanark. I mean, God's sake, there are 4 of these flaming places now in Lanark High Street. It's quite ridiculous. And something surely, rather than waiting for central government to act, should be possibly within the reach of the council itself.
Well, I think it is. That's the point, isn't it? Could you elaborate a little bit, Craig, on the Procurator Fiscal end and on the Licensing Committee end?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, in section 3.2 of the report, we've outlined details of the fixed penalty fines that the council issue when offences are found. The £200 fixed penalty notice is discounted to £150 if it's paid within 14 days. The ultimate sanction is a report to the Procurator Fiscal, which obviously is a time-consuming process, but we would feel that would be warranted where we've got repeat non-compliance, particularly if that's over a sustained period of time. The other thing which we're considering for members who may be on the licensing board, they'll be aware that the Licensing Act has 5 aims. One of those aims is protecting children and public health. And we feel quite strongly that because we are finding evidence of retailers who are consistently selling underage products to children, there could be a concern that they're selling other underage products to children as well. And therefore, we feel that's something we would maybe refer to the licensing board for them to consider in relation to the premises liquor licence. That would obviously be a decision for the licensing board, but we feel that to report it to the board is in keeping with the aims of the Licensing Scotland Act. Thank you, Chair.
Very much. Richard, are you okay with that?
Well, I guess I have to be. I mean, £200 for these guys is back pocket change stuff, and they're back on the street the next day. I mean, I don't think it's any form of disincentive. We are where we are.
Okay, I think that's why there was the talk of reporting to the Procurator Fiscal or to the Licensing Board. John Anderson.
Thanks, Chair. I think it's just much in the same vein as the last speaker there. 3.2, it says if a business sells a vape to a child, then they can be issued. I just wonder why it's not an automatic issuing of the fine. Another thing is, are these people paying the fines, or are they just ignoring the fines altogether? I'm just wondering if the sanction's tough enough. We just heard there about repeat offenders. People understand there's just no bother with the fine. They're quite happy to carry on trading, selling it to youngsters because they make more money from the sale of these things than what they would. They're quite happy to pay a fine. Like some people are quite happy just to pay a fine when they go on holiday, take their kids out of school. It's worth their while. So how many people do you think are involved in this that we could actually report them to the licence and revoke the licence and close the shop? Thanks.
Yeah. Craig, do you want to say anything on that?
Thanks, Chair. Councillor Anderson, and quite a number of points you've raised there. I can get you details of the number of businesses who have paid. My understanding is that the vast majority have paid. One of the things that we have done in terms of the repeat offences is there's a higher level of fine that can get passed on to the business owner. So as well as the person who actually commits the offence by selling the vape, you can also issue a fine to the business owner. So that's something we do in a graduated way for the repeat offences. In terms of the selling to a child where it could be issued, that will depend on the circumstances. In relation to our projects, then they follow the national guidance in relation to underage sales. So therefore, we actually have evidence that an offence has been committed. If somebody was to report to us that their child was sold a vape, we may not be able to take action on that because it would depend on the level of evidence. But that's why we actually use underage test purchases as part of our enforcement programme, so that we do actually have the evidence. We can then take the enforcement action and try and bring about sort of like change. Sorry, I'm kind of lost in terms of some other questions you were asking there.
Yeah, I was just asking how many, or could we revoke the licence from them and actually close the shop down, those repeat offenders? And what do you mean by repeat offenders? Is it somebody that's just done it twice, or is it maybe somebody that's doing it half a dozen times and just no bothering with the fines and just paying it?
In terms of the repeat offenders, last year we undertook, I think, 3 different projects throughout the course of the year. And those projects, where we had non-compliance at the first project, those premises were visited again later in the year. Some of them had committed an offence again and were issued a fixed penalty fine. And at the third project, some were also found to not comply with the Act. And it's those premises where in 24-25 we would consider what sanctions, what further sanctions or escalation of enforcement that we could apply. We could only report to the licensing board premises who have a liquor licence. There's some establishments only sell vapes, so we couldn't close them down, and it would be for the licensing board to determine whether there are any concerns that we raised in relation to the underage sales of nicotine vapour products is something that the board can consider in terms of the liquor licence that applied to the premises. So again, that's a matter for the licensing board to decide. It may not result in the premises closing down. It just means that they may not be able to sell alcohol. So there's no provisions within the legislation just now that by committing an offence you can close the premises. And I'm going to jump way back to the food legislation where you can actually close premises with non-compliance. Those powers don't exist under this legislation.
For the avoidance of doubt, just for the purposes of selling vapes by themselves, that doesn't need to be either licensed by the licensing committee or anything under the licensing board. That's a...
No, it's a separate entity.
Yeah, okay, thank you. Jerry Convery.
Thanks, Chair. Following on for John and Richard, you know, I get myself uptight about things. See what we can do. Let's do it. Instead of, well, it'll need to go here, needs to go there. These people are just flaunting the law and you're just selling to kids. We should be naming and shaming these people, and we should pass a bylaw, and we can pass bylaws for certain things. So let's take it to the licence committee. Let's no set up a meeting to talk about another meeting to set something up. Let's do it instead of let's talk and more action. Thank you.
Okay, and Andrew Carmichael.
Thanks, Chair. I echo all the comments being made by other members, in particular to Councillor Convery there, as Chair of the Licensing Committee and Chair of the Hamilton Board, right? I await confirmation that you'll come to the committee for us to decide on this bylaw as such. I'd just like to make a comment which could be beneficial to our trade and standards officers. When we go out and do our licensing board visits to various off-licenses, pubs, etc., the majority of vapes are sold within premises that hold a liquor license. We have found that the vapes are incorporated or displayed, shall I say, along with the alcohol side. Now, our licensing standards officers have stipulated to these retailers that that's inappropriate and have actually made them move. They've got to be separate from each other, so to speak, from alcohol to vape. And I would ask our colleagues in the trading standards, should they find that in any premises, by all means inform the licensing section and we will take necessary action. But I look forward to what's going to happen in the very near future. Thanks for that.
Thanks very much. I think if I can speak for the committee as a whole, I think there's clearly a high degree of outrage, frankly, at the actual situation that we've had reported on us here. I think the committee would support all appropriate actions, Craig, to take this matter forward effectively against the recalcitrant shops. Obviously, there's due process to be gone through in some of these matters. And I wonder if perhaps if you could report back to us at some suitable point as to what action has been able to be taken here. I do accept there are limitations, particularly what you said about there not being a license as such if it's not attached to licensed premises or the like. So there are some limits on that. And I dare say there may be some issues with the Procurator Fiscal as well. But we want to see, I think, this tackled effectively and taken forward as swiftly as you possibly can on this one. Craig?
Thank you, Chair. I'd be quite happy to come back to committee next year and to report on what we find in the 24-25 enforcement programme. It would be delightful to actually be able to report an improvement, but I'm more than happy to bring a report back on this year's enforcement programme.
That's great. Thank you very much. Sorry, just a minute. David?
Sorry, thank you very much. Just in addition to so that the committee's made itself very clear today in terms of a route to get these to the licensing committee and to the Procurator Fiscal. So I think this has been a really useful paper and the work that our colleagues in Environment and Trading Standards have done and actually prosecuting as far as they can in terms of the fines we're able to do, but there are limitations which you can. But as Craig's pointed out, there is a route through to take this to the licensing committee and where there is appropriate evidence to the Procurator Fiscal. So I think we will take away an action from this to find a way to get that in flow.
For the ones that are, we're not talking about the licensing board.
Sorry,
as opposed
board,
to the committee.
licensing board. Sorry, apologies.
Yeah. Jerry.
Covered it. Fine, Craig can come back with a report next year. It's action we want done now. So the road's to the licensing committee and they can take it forward. And we're limited to certain things, but that shouldn't be an obstacle to highlight this and name and shame these people.
Okay, I was going to say yes. I think we're getting a report back effectively next year at this time, but I think probably what we're looking for is something a bit sooner than that. It will give us an indication of how the enforcement is going on the current progress. I'll get something appropriate on that, Craig, as well. Thank you very much. Can we then, with that, these strong comments, approve the report? Thank you. Thank you very much. Moving on to item 15, which is the Community Benefits Fund's annual report, pages 153 to 168. Can I invite Alison Brown to speak to that one?
Thank you. This report provides an update on the Community Benefit Fund awarded in 23-24 associated with the Renewable Energy Fund and the Clyde Wind Farm Fund. The Renewable Energy Fund covers 42 wind farms and the Clyde Wind Farm also. Over the 9 years since the fund has been operational, grants of over £12 million have supported 836 projects and have also attracted an additional £18.7 million of other external funding. During 23-24, £3.7 million has been administered by the fund. Specifically for the Renewable Energy Fund, £2.5 million of contributions were received, with £989,000 of grant awards made to 61 projects. A list of these projects is provided in Appendix 1. In addition, 26 community councils or residents associations received microgrants, and again this is provided in Appendix 2. In relation to the Clyde Wind Farm Fund, contributions of nearly 1.2 million were received from SSE, which supported 8 new projects with a total grant award of just over 1.1 million. Again, details are provided in Appendix 3. 6 microgrants were also provided to community councils within that area, totalling £23,000 and again set out in Appendix 4. As in previous years, a publicity document will be prepared highlighting projects funded during that year. Turning back to the recommendation, committee is asked to note the community benefits funds administered for 23-24.
Thanks very much, Alistair. Any questions on that report? Can I then move the report? Report's approved. And the final item, item 16, the Roads Asset Management Plan 2024. The update, pages 169 to 184. We're familiar with this, I think, from last year, but can I invite Colin Park to speak to this report?
Thank you, Chair, and good afternoon, members. This is an annual report. Factual is the kind of key part I would point I'd make about this one. So the purpose of the report is to provide an update on the Roads Asset Management Plan and the condition of the roads and related infrastructure and assets. Members will be aware we have a ramp in place and we bring it to committee every year, and just to set out the kind of context, funding arrangements and how things have moved on from year on year. The Asset Management Plan is a framework that outlines the key principles and practices for the effective management of our maintenance and network across South Lanarkshire, and 3.2 just sets out the kind of 5 key principles there. Don't plan to go through it in detail. It's quite a full report. I'm sure members will have read the key parts, but just kind of pulling out some of the key headlines. In terms of carriageway assets, we've got 2,295 kilometres of road, and we are seeing a significant increase in some of the kind of replacement and steady state values. As it currently stands, this asset's valued at 2.263 billion. Moving down to sections 4.6 and 4.7, we do surveys across our network on a kind of regular basis. Our A-class routes are inspected at a kind of higher frequency, all the way down to our unclassified network. In 2023, there was an update done on our backlog calculation, and basically what the backlog calculation is for what needs to be spent on our network in one single year for our roads to be brought up to a serviceable standard, and that's increased from 90.420 million up to 106.494 million, so a significant increase, and to be fair, largely due to the kind of increase in costs of this type of maintenance treatment. And obviously an element of regression in our network, which we'll come on to shortly. Overall condition of our carriageways has regressed. The latest RCI figures, which is in the table below, indicates it's sitting at 31.9%, which is an increase of 1.1%, and the appendices later on in the report show individual movements across the kind of 4 categories of road. The table at the top of page 172, just to be clear, downward is good and upward isn't, and as you can see for the last kind of 3 years, 3 periods, 3 survey periods, it's been increasing year on year. Those full trends are shown in appendices, Appendix A for A, B and C and unclassified roads. I'm going to say positively, but you'll see in 4.11 there our position compared to the rest of Scotland hasn't changed. And on one hand that could be seen as being good, but it just shows that it's the same problem across Scotland that everybody's seeing, where their network's deteriorating a greater state in terms of what they can put in terms of investment. 4.12, again, just focusing on carriageways here, members will be aware of a figure I've used previously of 12.50 million. That's the figure we need to invest to keep our network at a steady state. For the same reasons as the figure earlier on has increased, that's now increased to 16.525 million following assessment done in 2023. Now, the steady state figure is just, whilst it's key, it's intended to be an indication of the magnitude of investment needed for South Lanarkshire and is used across Scotland. It's a standard practice. The figure is indicative. It could come down, it could go up, and what drives our investment priorities is our RCI condition index, but also our local knowledge of the network as well. And just given the kind of the nature of some of the surveys, which can be 3-4 years old, we do take assessment and into account what's actually happening on the ground on an annual basis. 4.14, projects are simply costing more. Equivalent scale of works that we're presently able to do isn't the same as what we had previously with the same levels of investment. We are close to the same levels of investment, but we're just not able to do as much on the ground. And members will remember from last year with a 23% increase. 2 years ago with a 23% increase in rates, and last year there was a further 30%. So that's a significant increase, especially when you take it in terms of kind of compound interest as well. This year we're investing 8.943. Again, that's against what we're required to invest of. Even if it was the 12.5, we're still not investing that. But we have maintained investment at similar levels to what we've had in previous years. In terms of the footway asset, again, just some headlines here, 2,425 kilometres of footway. Members will be aware it's been quite a significant We don't have the same level of inspection regime in place for footpaths. We did an exercise back in 2014 through to 17, which identified that 16.2 of our network needed to be treated for maintenance. Whilst we have enjoyed some decent investment in footway maintenance over the years, we haven't really went back to be able to measure the extent of the network purely because it's a very resource-intensive exercise to do. We are looking at some technology that might allow us to do that using some artificial intelligence, but that's something that might come in future years. This year we're investing 1 million towards footway improvements. Our steady-state figures increased from about 800,000 up to 1.3, so we're close, a lot closer in terms of our footway investment. But obviously a large proportion of footways do need to have investment. But the position for lighting set out there as well in relation to what we're required to invest in, what we are investing. And again, from a lighting point of view, we're not far away from what we need to do. Structures asset, we've got over just under 780 structures, which includes road, footbridges, footbridges, culverts and subways. We've got good records of most of that, and we are making progress with the funds that we have available. Again, the headline here is down at 7.7. The cost to maintain the structures in their current conditions, and i.e. the steady state figure is 6.420 million, which is up from just over 6 in the previous calculation. And at this moment in time, we're only able to invest just under £1 million, and that's in terms of us being 850,000. Scrolling on down through to traffic signals, obviously a large kind of asset group as well, 233. We do try and replace them on a more of a proactive basis, so we don't lose injunctions when they fail at key times of the year. This year we're only able to allocate around about 240,000 towards upgrades to traffic signals, and clearly the cost to maintain it in their current condition is set at 8.5 is 1.830 million. So again, we're quite far off what we require to achieve. Probably just other kind of, maybe just jump into conclusions really now, because other kind of groups are fairly clear how they've been set out in the report. Roads and related infrastructure is key for our economy. It keeps our communities and businesses connected. Businesses use it to deliver goods and services, buses to get to and from schools, people to travel to work in communities, to access shopping, schools and further learning. It's a key asset group for us, and we have to continue to invest as much as we can. 10.2 sets out just a summary of what I've said in terms of carriageways, footways, etc. The key point is with the level of investment we have at this moment in time, albeit we've been able to maintain it, it's not given us the same level of investment that we do require. And there is an expectation that if it stays the same, our condition of our network will continue to deteriorate to a level that will be difficult to recover from. Section 12 there sets out the financial position, just kind of covers very much largely the points I've already made, and it's recognised that we must consider this investment in line with many other competing priorities across the Council, and this remains extremely challenging. We will continue to look at opportunities to secure external investment, and we've done that quite successfully in recent years, where we're able to tap into active travel pots of money, economic development pots of money as well, to allow us to do some maybe new enhancement, but also tackle wider corridor maintenance enhancements as well. Turning back to the recommendation, committees asked to note the content of the report and support the approach to date. Thank you. Chair.
Thanks very much, Kevin. That's, Colin, that's probably one of the most depressing reports we've had in a long time, isn't it? In terms of that, it reflects a lot of national issues, but across the board, I mean, the investment levels required in roads and structures and lights and all that is very, very substantial. Questions from John Anderson.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, right, it's a bit of a depressing report, this, and it is really worrying that the road conditions are now in a worse condition than they have been. And also the report points to they're only going to get worse in the future. And that's really undoing all the good work that we've done in the recent years to try and bring them up to the standard they were after many, many years of decline in the past. And a lot of money was spent trying to improve them. But if you look at it now, I mean, all this is despite this council borrowed 7.2 million. And it's having to pay back 19.2 million for the roads. And this is supposed to be done under a so-called prudential borrowing. And I just can't understand that, and we're now predicting that it's not going to improve the roads, they're just going to get worse. And if you look back, you'll probably be well aware of the commitments that was made in the manifestos running up to the local elections. I mean, the Lib Dems had said, we will commit resource to tackling the chronically poor condition of local roads. And they are getting worse. Labour, our commitment is that South Lanarkshire Roads Network will consistently rank among the best in the country. We will back up our commitment with the necessary investment in carriageway resurfacing and improvements. Now, I'm just wondering, with the usual mantra of blaming the Scottish Government, do you not think that Mortis has been let down here? Thanks.
I think, if I may say so, Councillor Anderson, I think you're getting your retaliation in first on that particular one. Manifestly, there's a national issue here. Manifestly, the underfunding of the councils over a number of years by the Scottish Government under the SNP has got a good deal to do with this particular situation. But it's fair to say, just moving away from the political bit, that the information we get, for example, about the increase in prices is really kind of crucially important as well. We've got a situation in 414 where price increases have gone up by over 50% over the last 2 years. And we know that in terms of asphalt, in terms of projects, we're seeing contracts coming through and all of that. And the Scottish Government gives us a flat cash settlement. You've got to be joking and blaming the councils for this particular aspect of the matter. Can we move on to something a bit more productive and go to Kenny McCreary?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. So I've just got a question for Colin on the RCI performance. So obviously that the costs are getting greater, and you know, but surely all the councils face the same challenges. So the question is there something unique to South Lanarkshire that means we're dropping down the index? Thanks, Chair.
Colin?
Thank you, Chair, and Councillor McCreary. I would say it's not unique to South Lanarkshire. I represent Scots Executive Board, which is the Society of Chief Officers of Transportation in Scotland, and it's the same problem across all 32 authorities, and we are looking to try and take a kind of society position on that to highlight the need for greater investment to national government. From one of the kind of tables that's in the report, we'll see that we've maintained our position at 12th, so we're not dropping down. But we're not getting any better. But the very nature of the challenges that we're seeing must mean everyone else is in a very similar position there. So we're not unique, but we are, if anything, I think we've been able to maintain the same level of investment, which is good, and that's obviously all I can ask for just now. Clearly, I would like more, but I do recognise the pressures across the kind of council and the kind of multitude of areas of services and infrastructure that's needing that level of investment, but it's simply not buying us as much on the ground, and I think that's the key point I have to make there. Thank you, Chair.
Kenny, do you want to come back on that?
I thought I read in the report we dropped from 7th to 12th. Is that not the case?
No, we did. Let me just go back a stage, Councillor McCreary.
From 2008.
Yeah. So we had, if you look at the table of that at the end of 411, you'll see that in the last couple of years we've stayed 12. Just checking to see the highest ranking. So our highest ranking of 7th was in 2018-2020. So to be fair, since 5-6 years ago we have went down. But we have stayed in the last 2 years in terms of our reporting from last year. We have stayed 12th. 2 years before that, we went from 10th to 12th. But we've stayed pretty static just now. And as I'm saying, I think that just demonstrates we're just staying mid-table.
Yeah, I think that's right.
Thank you.
John Anderson again.
Yeah, just a couple of points about what we said there. These manifesto commitments were written at a time when this council had produced a 5-year what it expected to cut, and you talk about a flat cash settlement for the Scottish Government, it predicted there would be a £5 million cut each of the 5 years. So I think then you should have looked at your manifesto to see what you could have done. But the harsh reality here is that the chronic underfunding of the Scottish Government is a direct result of the austerity that your party, after jumping into bed with the Tories, introduced. So I think you've got a cheek to come here and say it's all the fault of the Scottish Government. West Stirling, I think Labour said, all roads lead to Westminster. So let's see what Westminster's going to do and restore the 9% cut that they had to the Scottish Government for its capital, 1.5 billion. And then you might see some more money coming from the Scottish Government. Thanks.
Well, I can only say to respond to that, if there's a £5 million per annum postulated, the figure we're now dealing with is £20 million a year of cutback in terms of the savings we have to make as a council. Now, with the best will in the world, that is extraordinarily challenging. And the council has had to make very, very difficult decisions both last year and the years to come that will actually affect all this. I hope when we come to the budget discussion, we can be cognizant of the figures that are coming out of the report. It's early days, obviously, for that, but it's fairly evident that if you take the roads alone, you're talking about a figure of 16.525 million, except with all the ups and downs that Colin is talking about, just to keep things standing as they currently are. Now, that's against a figure of 12.5 million that was spoken about before, and a figure of much more like £8 to £9 million, which I think is our actual spend on the roads specifically. So there's quite a bit of challenge on that one. I was totting up the figures that we're dealing with here across the board for steady state, and we're talking here about something like £27.3 million a year to stand still across roads, structures, traffic lights, and the various other bits and pieces that are in this report. That's a huge challenge for this council. But it's fair to say, I think it's a huge challenge for other councils. And to be fair to John, it's a challenge, I think, across the UK as well as in Scotland. But in Scotland, we've had the particular problem of the Scottish Government giving to councils, like for like, less funding than we've actually been, as a proportion of the Scottish total, than goes to other parts of the public spending domain. And that's part of the issue that we lie behind this. I think that's probably an issue for other forums, frankly, than to be gone into too much here. Are there any other questions on the report as such? No questions, then can I move the report?
I'll second it.
The report is then approved. I have no items of urgent business, and can I therefore thank you for your attendance and draw the meeting to a close.